This story happened about 5 years ago. At the time, I had just moved into my first real place on my own. A small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, the carpet was cheap, the walls were thin, and the ceilings felt low. But after years of living with roommates in cramped college housing, it felt like freedom. The building itself was shaped like an L, and my unit sat right at the corner. That gave me 2 windows in the living room, one facing the parking lot, and the other facing this narrow alley that no one ever seemed to use. My bedroom looked out over a stretch of woods behind the complex. Honestly, the isolation was part of the appeal. No noisy neighbors on one side, no street traffic blaring outside, just quiet. I worked evenings at a small printing company, usually getting home just before midnight. My routine was always the same: reheat something quick, flop onto the couch or bed with my laptop, and scroll until I was tired enough to sleep. That quiet routine made the apartment feel safe, predictable. But that feeling didn't last. It was just after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I'd gotten home late, eaten some leftover pizza, and crawled into bed. I was half asleep, phone still in my hand, when I heard it, the sound of someone rattling my front door handle. At first I brushed it off. Maybe it was a neighbor messing with their own door. Walls were thin. I could hear people sneeze 3 units over. But then the rattling turned into soft, deliberate knocks. Not the kind you make when you're visiting a friend. This was slower, lighter, like they were testing to see if I was awake. I didn't move. I just lay there, frozen, staring at the ceiling. After a minute, the knocking stopped. For a second, I thought maybe it was nothing. Then, I heard footsteps. Slow, cautious ones. They weren't walking away from the door. They were circling around the outside of my unit, toward the alley window. The alley window had always been the weakest part of the apartment. Just a single flimsy latch, no lock, nothing to keep it secure. I'd thought about fixing it, but never did. That night, I regretted it, because I heard the unmistakable sound of the window sliding open. Adrenaline shot through me. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed the only thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy floor lamp, and crept toward the living room. The apartment was dark, lit only by the orange glow of the parking lot streetlight leaking through the blinds. When I rounded the corner, I saw it. The window inching upward, 2 pale hands gripping the sill. Someone was climbing in. I don't even remember deciding what to do. I just screamed at the top of my lungs and swung the lamp like a baseball bat. The hands vanished instantly, and I heard a body stumble back onto the gravel outside. By the time I yanked up the blinds, all I saw was a figure bolting down the alley. Gone in seconds. I called 911, shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. The operator told me to stay on the line until officers arrived, which felt like forever. When they finally showed up, they checked the alley. The intruder was long gone, but there were footprints in the dirt and greasy smudges on the glass where they'd tried to force the window. The officers asked if I had any enemies, if someone might want to scare me. I didn't. I was just some broke 20-something with a quiet, uneventful life. That was the most unsettling part. Whoever had tried to get in hadn't chosen me for any reason I could understand. They'd just chosen me. I barely slept that night or the nights that followed. I bought extra locks, wedged wooden dowels into every window track, and eventually set up a cheap security camera. None of it made me feel fully safe again. And here's what still haunts me. The alley outside my window wasn't visible from the street. You had to know it was there. Which means the person who tried to break in had scoped the place out. They'd been there before. Watching, waiting. I never saw that person again. Maybe it was random, maybe not. But to this day, every time I move somewhere new, the first thing I do is check the locks, the windows, and the angles where someone could approach unseen. Because the scariest part of a home intrusion isn't the moment someone tries to break in. It's realizing that, for however long they were out there, your home wasn't really yours. It was theirs too. This happened a little over a year ago, and I still get uneasy every time I think about it. At the time, I was living alone in a small rental house on the edge of town. It wasn't anything special, but I liked the privacy. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly older folks, and I figured that made it safer. I'd been there for almost 2 years without a single issue. No strange neighbors, no late night noise, nothing. It felt like the kind of place you could really relax in. On this particular night, it was a Friday. Just after 11 p.m., I had been up late catching up on work emails and was about to shut my laptop when I heard what sounded like scratching at my back door. At first, I thought it might just be a stray cat. It wasn't uncommon for animals to wander around the yards out there, but when I paused and listened more closely, it was clear this wasn't an animal. The sound was too deliberate, too steady, like someone was fiddling with a lock. My stomach dropped. I turned off my lamp and sat there in the dark, listening. The noise stopped for maybe a minute, and then came 3 loud knocks, slow, heavy, and spaced out. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be discreet anymore. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. I just sat there frozen, hoping they'd go away. After about a minute of silence, I worked up the nerve to peek through the blinds of my front window. What I saw made my skin crawl. There was a man standing perfectly still at the edge of my yard, facing the house. He wasn't close enough for me to make out details, but I could see the outline of his head and shoulders under the dim streetlight. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver so whoever it was wouldn't hear me. While I was still on the call with dispatch, I heard a faint click from the back door, followed by the unmistakable creak of it opening. I swear, my blood ran cold. I told the operator someone was inside and that I needed officers immediately. She told me to stay quiet and hidden until help arrived. The footsteps started almost instantly. Slow, cautious, like he didn't want to alert me. I could hear them on the tile floor of the kitchen, moving deeper into the house. I crept upstairs as quietly as I could and locked myself in the bedroom, pressing my back against the door. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking me to whisper updates. I told her I could hear him moving around downstairs, opening drawers, sliding closet doors. At one point, I swear I heard him humming to himself. It felt like forever, but in reality, it was probably less than 10 minutes before I saw the blue and red lights wash across my bedroom wall. The footsteps stopped. Then, silence. When the officers finally entered the house, they found the back door wide open and muddy boot prints leading into the living room. But the intruder himself was gone. They searched the whole property, inside and out, and turned up nothing. What unsettled me the most wasn't just that someone had broken in, it was what he chose to take. My wallet, laptop, and television were all untouched. The only things missing were a couple of framed photos from my living room shelf and a set of spare keys I kept in a kitchen drawer. That was it. The police wrote up a report, but I could tell they didn't know what to make of it either. They told me to change the locks immediately, which I did the very next morning. I also installed the security system and cameras, but I haven't felt truly comfortable in that house since. To this day, I don't know who that man was, how long he might have been watching me, or what he wanted with my photos and spare keys. And the worst part, I never saw him leave. I just know he was inside my home, and then suddenly, he wasn't. I'm a woman in my late 20s, and I've been living alone in this apartment for just under a year. It's on the 2nd floor of an older building. Not the nicest place in the world, but it's safe, affordable, and close to work. I had grown comfortable with the place and even found some charm in its creaky floors and outdated fixtures. For the most part, it felt like mine. The incident happened on a Monday night. Around 1 a.m., I was lying on the couch, scrolling on my phone, half asleep, when I heard the sound of my front door handle rattling. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, slow, deliberate twisting of the knob, like someone testing it. My stomach dropped. I muted the television and just listened. After a few seconds of silence, I heard a soft scraping sound, like someone was trying a key that didn't quite fit. That's when I realized someone was actively trying to get in. I froze. I live alone, and no one besides the landlord should have a key. I tiptoed to the peephole, my heart racing. but the hallway light was dim and flickering, so I couldn't make out much. All I saw was a tall shadow leaning close to my door. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, but they were clearly focused on my lock. Before I could decide what to do, they knocked 3 times. Not loud, not aggressive, just steady. Then a low voice, muffled through the door, said, "Open up. I'm home." I didn't respond. They waited a moment, then knocked again, this time harder. The same voice, more insistent. "Come on, don't do this. Just let me in." I felt paralyzed. I wanted to call the police, but some part of me thought, what if it's a mistake? What if it's just a drunk neighbor who got the wrong door? I live in an old building with identical doors after all. But then, the voice said something that made my blood run cold. They said my name. Not ma'am, not hey. They said my actual name, and they said it like they knew me. At that point, I grabbed my phone and whispered to 911. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, stay quiet, and wait for officers. While I was hiding behind the couch, the person outside kept talking through the door. They said things about the apartment, specific details that no one outside should know. They mentioned the window in my bedroom that sticks when you try to open it. They mentioned the squeaky cabinet under the sink. They even mentioned a stain on the carpet near the radiator, something I'd only ever noticed when I first moved in. That's when the knocking stopped. I heard footsteps, but instead of going down the hall, they moved sideways toward my bedroom window. The dispatcher told me to stay put, and within minutes, I heard sirens. The moment the cops pulled up outside, everything went silent. Whoever it was, they were gone. When the officers checked the building, they found fresh scratches around my lock and faint shoe prints outside my window, but no sign of the intruder. They told me it was probably just someone who used to live there and hadn't let go of the idea that it was still their place. They recommended changing my locks and keeping the chain on at all times. The thing is, I already had new locks put in when I moved in. I never gave out a spare key, and yet, whoever was at my door knew my name, knew my apartment, and knew things they shouldn't. For the next week, I barely slept. Every creak and hum of the building made me jump. And just when I started to think it was over, I found something taped to my door one morning. An old photograph. It was of the very living room I was standing in. Same couch, same radiator, but not my stuff. Someone else's furniture, someone else's life. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, was one short sentence. "I told you I live here."
When I was about 16, my parents decided to take a last-minute weekend trip out of town. It wasn't unusual. They liked little getaways to wine country or the mountains. And I was at the age where they trusted me to be home alone for a couple nights. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, one of those cookie-cutter developments with identical houses, trimmed lawns, and nosy neighbors who wave at you while watering their plants. Honestly, nothing bad ever really happened around here. So when my parents asked if I'd be okay alone for the weekend, I didn't even hesitate. I was actually looking forward to it. I could stay up late, order junk food, binge horror movies without my mom complaining about the volume. The first night went exactly how I expected. I ordered takeout, played some Dead by Daylight online with friends, and passed out around 2 a.m. The second night, though, is when things got weird. It was around 11:30. I was in the living room scrolling through my phone with a movie playing in the background. I remember the television was showing one of those bad 90s slasher flicks that always came on cable. Out of nowhere, I heard a tap at the front window. At first, I thought it was my imagination, or maybe a bug hitting the glass. But then it happened again. A slow, deliberate tap-tap-tap against the glass. Our front porch has this small overhang and one of those wide, rectangular windows beside the door. The blinds were half closed, so I couldn't immediately see who or what was out there. I muted the television and sat completely still, listening. And then I heard it, a man's voice, low and kind of shaky. He said, "Hey, can you open up? I need to use your phone." Every hair on my body stood up. I didn't answer. I just stayed completely still. hoping maybe he'd think no one was home. But then the doorknob rattled. Not like a test. It was forceful, like someone was trying to turn it hard, expecting it to open. I grabbed my phone and called my dad immediately. He didn't pick up. I tried my mom, no answer. They were probably out at dinner somewhere with bad reception. That's when I remembered my neighbor, Mr. Dalton. Retired cop, lived right next door. He was usually up late, watching television in his den. I called his number, thank God I had it saved. He answered on the second ring. I kept my voice low and told him someone was outside my house trying to get in. He went quiet for a second and then said he was grabbing his gun and coming over. I stayed on the line with him, crouched behind the couch, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then, another voice. This one was a woman. She called out, "Please, it's an emergency. I just need to come inside." But here's the thing. The voice sounded off. It didn't sound desperate. It sounded rehearsed, almost like someone pretending to sound scared. I didn't move. I barely breathed. A minute later, Mr. Dalton's voice shouted from his porch, "Hey, get the hell off that property before I call the cops." I heard footsteps running off into the night. When Mr. Dalton reached my porch, he didn't see anyone. He told me to stay inside, lock every door and window, and he called the police. When the officers arrived about 15 minutes later, they found footprints in the flower bed under my living room window. 2 different sets. One large, one smaller. They followed the tracks down the street, but they disappeared near an alleyway that cut between 2 houses. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. The scariest part? There was no car seen leaving the neighborhood. Whoever it was, they either lived nearby or were still out there somewhere, on foot, watching. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And to this day, every time I hear a tap at the window, my stomach sinks. When I was 21, I rented a small guest house behind an old farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. It wasn't anything fancy, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a tiny living room. But the rent was cheap, and the property backed up to thick woods that stretched for miles. I liked it. It was quiet, peaceful, and for someone trying to finish college remotely, it felt perfect. The only downside was how dark it got out there at night. I mean pitch black. No streetlights, no neighbors in sight, just endless trees. I had a routine. Around 11 p.m., I'd take my dog, Cooper, a beagle mix, outside for a quick bathroom break before bed. Then we'd lock up, turn on a movie, and fall asleep on the couch. One night in late October, I did just that. Took Cooper out, walked around the yard, and noticed how unusually quiet it was. No wind, no bugs, no distant cars, just total silence. It put me on edge, but I brushed it off. I figured it was just one of those weird, still nights you get before it rains. I brought Cooper in, locked the doors, and started a horror movie on my laptop. About halfway through, something changed. I got that unmistakable feeling like my skin knew something my eyes didn't. A crawling tension at the back of my neck, as if someone was watching me. I paused the movie, listened. Nothing. But Cooper's ears perked up, and he let out a low, uneasy growl. I sat up, looked toward the small window by the back door. Total darkness. Then, I saw it. The faintest outline of a figure, standing motionless by the tree line. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to know it wasn't an animal, just a shape. Still, watching. I told myself it was a shadow, maybe a tree, anything but a person. But then the shape moved. Slowly, deliberately, closer. I scrambled to turn on the porch light. The bulb flickered, barely illuminating the yard, but there was no one there. I stared for what felt like forever, then shut the blinds and locked the deadbolt. I wanted to call someone, but who? I didn't even know the owners well. No one else was around for miles. I tried to go to bed, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint sound. Tap, 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 Coming from the window above my bed, my room was on the second floor. I froze. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Another tap. Cooper started growling, low and steady, eyes locked on the window. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me not to, but I did. I turned my head slowly toward the glass, and there he was. A man. Pale face, wild, unkempt hair, his mouth twisted into a crooked grin. His hand was raised, a single finger gently tapping the glass. Our eyes met. I couldn't breathe. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just kept tapping. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I dialed 911 and whispered my address. But when I looked back, he was gone. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the property, the woods, everywhere. They didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. But that wasn't the end of it. For the next week, every night at exactly 2 a.m., I'd hear faint tapping on a window. Different windows, the kitchen, the bathroom. Even once at the front door's glass pane. I never saw him again, but I knew it was him. I left that place before the month was over, broke my lease, packed everything I owned into my car, and drove straight to my sister's house 3 towns over. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted, but sometimes in dead, quiet nights, I swear I can still hear it. Tap, tap,